right, today we're going to dig into something that affects every single one of us, the places we call home. We're going to ask a really big question. Who actually gets to decide how our cities get built and run? We'll be looking at the case of Rajshahi, a major city in Bangladesh, to really understand why having a say matters so much. Let's get right into it.
Seriously, just think about it for a second. That new road they just put in down the street, or that park they're planning on building. Did anyone actually ask you what you thought? Did you feel like you had a voice in that process? It's a simple question, right? But it's at the absolute heart of everything we're exploring today.
To even begin to answer that, we've got to wrap our heads around one key concept, the stakeholder. Now I know, it's a word that gets thrown around all the time, but what does it actually mean when we're talking about our cities? Well, the definition is actually pretty simple and it's broad on purpose. A stakeholder is basically any group or any individual who is affected by a project or who can affect it. So yeah, that's not just the folks in City Hall or the project managers. It's you. It's your neighbors. It's the person who runs the corner store. It's pretty much everyone. And this diagram here, it really paints the picture perfectly. See that inner circle? That's your internal crew, the project teams, the city employees, the people funding it. But then you look at those outer layers, and that's where it gets really interesting. We're talking about local communities, the general public, environmental watchdogs, even the media. Everybody has some skin in the game, and they can all influence how things turn out. Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this all play out in the real world? For that, we're going to zoom in on Rajshahi, a huge, rapidly growing city in Bangladesh that is right in the middle of a massive makeover. And listen, we are not talking about a few new benches here. We're talking about huge infrastructure projects, new 4-lane roads, giant flyovers, even redeveloping major cultural heritage sites. This city is changing, and it is changing fast, which of course makes that whole question of who gets a say even more urgent. But here's the problem. The central issue this research uncovered, there's this massive disconnect. On one hand, you have all this incredible development happening, but on the other, you have the people who actually live there. So the big question becomes, who is being left out of the conversation? Well, the data from the study is pretty staggering. The answer is most people, 62%. That's more than 6 out of every 10 residents surveyed who said they had zero involvement in these huge city projects. None. That's a clear majority of people who feel completely sidelined. And if you look at this chart, it gets even clearer. That huge bar on the left, that's the 56% who said no involvement, period. Then you have a smaller chunk who might have, attended a public meeting. But look at that tiny little sliver on the end. Only 8%, just 8% felt they were actually involved in making decisions. So even when people do participate, it often feels like they're just there to listen, not to actually be heard. So you gotta ask, right? Why? Why is this happening? If getting the public involved is so important for a healthy city, what's stopping it from happening? What are the roadblocks?
Well, the study points to a few key things, but there is one that just leaps off the page. Nearly half the people surveyed, 49%, pointed to one major issue, corruption. That was the number one barrier by a long shot. After that, you have people saying they just didn't know enough about what was going on, or they felt like, what's the point? I don't have any real power anyway. And this quote really gets to the human side of those numbers. Residents felt that political games and favoritism just poisoned the well. They'd give their input, or NGOs would make recommendations, but they were almost always ignored. It made the whole idea of participation feel, fake. Like it was all just for show, a symbolic gesture. And when that's the feeling, you can't blame people for losing faith in the entire system.
And get this, 94%, that is practically everyone surveyed, they all agreed that political interference and bureaucratic red tape were a major challenge. So this isn't just some minor annoyance. People see it as the fundamental thing standing in the way of them having a real voice.
Okay, so that all sounds pretty discouraging, I know. But the good news is this study isn't just about pointing out what's broken. It actually lays out a clear blueprint for how to start fixing it. So let's talk solutions.
Remember how corruption was the number one barrier? Well, no surprise here. When you ask people what would help, the answer is crystal clear. A whopping 98% said that measures to prevent corruption and increase transparency would absolutely lead to more public participation. The message couldn't be simpler. If you want people to engage, they have to be able to trust the system. So how do we get there? The study suggests a pretty practical four-step plan. First, you've got to provide training and build up people's ability to participate effectively. Second, you just have to raise public awareness and improve communication. Actually let people know what's going on. And finally, the cornerstone of it all, making sure the entire decision-making process is transparent from start to finish. It's a real actionable roadmap. And that brings us full circle. The lessons from Rajshahi are a powerful reminder that building a city is about so much more than concrete and steel. It's about building a community where everyone's voice actually matters. So I'll leave you with this to think about. If transparency and participation are the keys to a better city, what's unlocking the door where you live?